Putin's political core is giving way. Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine could be disrupted by a number of potential events in the near future. The first is the impact on Moscow's war machine from domestic political turmoil in Belarus and Iran should their ailing leaders pass away. Next, if Ukraine keeps hitting Russia's political and military epicenters, it could cast serious doubt on the future of Putin's military operation and his own future in power. Russia is likely to be given short shrift by a Beijing frustrated that Putin's promised three-week offensive has dragged on for over a year if the US and China find a way to improve the current poor state of their relations. Dominic Nichols, associate editor at The Telegraph, joins us this week on Defense in Depth to discuss the deterioration of Putin's political relationships and why this should worry the Russian president. You can check out the entire episode of Defense in Depth up top, as well as other videos from The Telegraph, on our channel. The most dramatic evidence to date of a major shift in the Russo-Ukrainian war is the May 30th drone attack on Moscow, in which at least 3 unmanned aerial vehicles hit apartment blocks. Western allies of Ukraine officially discourage offensive action against Russia proper, as opposed to Russian-occupied Ukrainian regions, so the Ukrainian government can maintain a semblance of deniability. This latest drone attack, along with previous attempts to strike the Kremlin and the Krasnodar region in southern Russia, and the recent incursion of a small group of fighters using Western military vehicles into Russia's southern Belgorod region, have all gone unclaimed by Kyiv. Neither has it admitted to shelling Russian towns and villages or destroying Russian trains. There have been too many of these incidents for them to be interpreted as anything other than a deliberate Ukrainian strategy to escalate the conflict with the Russians. This strategy is a risk with obvious short-term military benefits and potentially devastating long-term psychological consequences, which Ukraine has so far avoided by keeping civilian casualties to a minimum. Daring cross-border raids or drone and missile strikes, the military justification for attacks deep into Russian territory has 2 prongs. First, these feints make the Russian leadership think about the many weak spots across Russia's vast territory. The Ukrainian group, apparently led by disaffected Russians, attacked in the Belgorod region at a location where a recently fortified and expensively built section of border ended and a border post was barely staffed. Before being driven back, the fighters took over 3 sleepy villages and raised the Ukrainian flag over a social club. Even Putin acknowledged that Moscow's air defenses need work after drones were able to breach them by flying low and apparently not using satellite navigation on the approach. As a result, Russian military command is being forced to pull resources away from the front in Ukraine, which aids the Ukrainian command in its efforts to throw off the enemy's sense of the impending counteroffensive's likely trajectory. Second, the attacks serve a purpose in Ukraine's high-tech information war. They have eliminated any potential fallout from the surrender of Bakhmut, a town that Ukraine spent a lot of money defending. They have also successfully probed the reactions of Western allies of Ukraine to more risky Ukrainian action. Official responses from the United States and the United Kingdom have been measured. There has been no discernible wavering in the Western nations' commitment to supplying Ukraine with longer-range missiles like the UK's Storm Shadow and warplanes like the F-16. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has once again succeeded in doing the impossible, most notably by offering new tantalizing evidence that Russia is weak and unable to set red lines when probed. The attacks are a concrete illustration of the theory that Putin is incapable of dealing with anything other than force. If Ukraine is confident in its counteroffensive plans, these benefits will be crucial. All Russian territorial gains in Ukraine since 2014 will be in deep trouble so quickly that Putin may be unable to fight on if the Ukrainian military can decisively sever Russia's land bridge to Crimea, a long crescent of territory in Ukraine's east and south that is less than 100 miles wide in some places. However, the buccaneering raids into Russia proper could backfire if the counteroffensive fails, as Ukrainian troops face massive new Russian fortifications and a more experienced and cautious adversary. Russia's professional military is in disarray due to corruption and brash incompetence on the part of Russia's generals, but this isn't Putin's biggest problem as the invasion drags on. Instead, it's the fact that there's not a widespread backing for the war. For instance, the vast majority of Russians have refused to make even token financial contributions to the war effort. The invading army's biggest weakness is the low morale of its troops stationed in Ukraine. Putin's initial attempt at mobilization last fall was met with a similar number of desertions from men of fighting age as were enlisted. Attacks on Russian soil could alter this dynamic. During the Chechen War of the 1990s and 2000s, they did. The majority of Russians favored a peaceful resolution or even an unconditional troop withdrawal in 1994, when a separatist Chechen government declared its intention to secede from Russia and Russia intervened militarily. In a 1997 survey, 51% of respondents expressed support for Chechnya's independence. In spite of this, by the end of 1999, a whopping 66% of the public was in favor of keeping up the military pressure, a sentiment that was kept alive by a Chechen raid into the neighboring region of Dagestan and a series of bloody terrorist attacks on airplanes, the Moscow subway, and, finally, residential buildings in Moscow and elsewhere. Despite accusations from Putin's detractors that he staged the building explosions as a false flag operation designed to undermine his popularity, Putin's successful campaign to defeat the separatists or entice them to the Russian side was widely praised. Of course, Ukrainians aren't afraid to anger the Russians. Many of them rightly believe that Russia has thrown everything it can at them and they're still standing. However, a change in public opinion in Russia can still alter the course of a drawn-out campaign. To draw on Russia's mobilization reserve of at least 2 million people, Putin needs the Russian people to forget who actually started this war and become angry. He requires the Chechnya effect, to put it another way. Prominent patriots, like Wagner mercenary army founder Yevgeny Prigozhin and Ukraine war veteran Igor Girkin aka Strelkov, are already outraged by the drone strike on Moscow, with Prigozhin cursing out the military leadership and Girkin dripping his usual sarcasm. The Chechnya effect, however, is not produced in this way.